Tonight, we escape into the shadows for another sleep story edition of Steamy Stories After Dark marked by midnight. If you find yourself captivated by my stories, share the secret with a friend. Please subscribe and click the bell to receive notifications, to join our community, and if you'd like, leave a comment to share what you think of the series and what time it is and what part of the world you're listening. It is nice to see the reach this series is getting. Settle in. The journey starts now. Episode 7. The Breaking of Arkenfall. 1. The Cold Silence of the Sanctum. The world didn't end with a scream. It ended with the sound of a heavy iron door groaning shut. A sound so final, so utterly devoid of hope, that it felt like a grave marker being slid into place over my living body. I was chained to a slab of cold black obsidian in the heart of the Sanctum of Silence. This wasn't a classroom. It wasn't a dormitory. It was a place that didn't exist on any map of Arkenfall Academy, a geographical ghost whispered about only in the most forbidden corners of the library. The air here was dead. It didn't move. It didn't carry the scent of the pine forest outside or the salt of the distant sea. It tasted of dry metallic dust and the lingering ozone-heavy ghost of ancient suppressed magic. My wrists were bound in Mage-Bane iron. The shackles weren't smooth. They were etched with jagged, hungry runes that felt like ice-cold teeth sinking into my skin, searching for the marrow. Every time I tried to reach for the blood oath, every time I tried to find that shimmering silver thread that connected my soul to Kade's, the iron pulsed. It sent a sickening jolt of anti-magic through my nervous system, a vibration so violent it made my teeth ache and my vision blur with gray static. I lay there staring up at the vaulted ceiling where shadows coiled like living things. I could feel the mark on my arm throbbing, a dull, rhythmic ache that mirrored my heartbeat. It was hungry. It was lonely. Without Kade's presence to feed it, the mark felt like a wound that refused to close. "It's no use, Elara." A voice drifted from the gloom, smooth and clinical, like a blade sliding through silk. The Headmaster stepped into the circle of flickering blue torchlight. He had removed his gallifinery, the gold embroidery and velvet capes replaced by the ritual robes of the High Council, stiff bone-white silk embroidered with hundreds of tiny, unblinking eyes that seemed to watch me from every fold of the fabric. "The sanctum was built to hold gods," he said, his footsteps echoing like slow, deliberate heartbeats against the stone. "A scholarship student with a stolen bond is nothing to these walls. You are a fly in a web of our making, struggling against threads you cannot even see." He reached out, his fingers, cold as a corpse and smelling of old parchment, tracing the violet lines of the mark on my inner arm. I flinched, the metal of the obsidian slab biting into the small of my back, but there was nowhere to run. "Do you know why we chose you, Elara? Out of 1,000 applicants with better lineages, deeper pockets, and bloodlines that stretch back to the first kings?" I gritted my teeth, the iron shackles burning as I tried to pull away. "Because I was smart. Because I was a blank slate. Because I had no family to miss me if I vanished into the shadows of the school." "No," he whispered, leaning down until I could see the madness dancing in his pupils, a frantic yellow light that made my skin crawl. "Because your magical frequency is a perfect vacuum. You don't just hold magic, Elara. You consume it. You were never meant to be Kade Valen's partner. You were meant to be his cage. You were the sponge we designed to soak up his volatility, to drain his power until there was nothing left of the Valen Heir but a hollow, obedient shell we could move like a chess piece." He picked up a jagged silver needle from a stone tray. It hummed with a low, discordant frequency that made my ears bleed. "But you changed the polarity," he continued, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You stopped consuming, and you started sharing. You turned a cage into a conduit. You gave him a reason to fight back, and for that the Council has decreed a total reset. We are going to peel back the layers of your mind until the girl who loved Kade Valen is gone, leaving only the vacuum we require. He held the needle over the center of the mark. This will hurt, he said, his voice almost kind, almost fatherly. But by the time I'm done, you won't even remember the color of his eyes. You will be empty, and in that emptiness, we will find our peace. 2. The needle and the void. The needle didn't just pierce my skin, it pierced the very fabric of my being. Pain, pure, white, agonizing, detonated behind my eyes. It wasn't just physical, it felt like my soul was being unspooled, one agonizing thread at a time. I screamed, the sound dying against the damp stone wall, swallowed instantly by the unnatural silence of the sanctum. I watched, through a haze of involuntary tears, as the violet lines of the mark began to turn a sickly ashen gray. The connection to Kade, the warmth that had lived in the center of my chest since the night of the blood oath, began to flicker like a candle in a gale. Kade, I called out in the silence of my mind, my thoughts fracturing under the pressure of the needle. Kade, please, find me. Don't let them take the memory of us. But there was no answer. Only the cold. Only the void. The headmaster twisted the needle, and I felt my consciousness begin to slip. The memories of the library, the smell of old books, and the way the sunlight hit Kade's hair began to blur. The memory of the obsidian dress, the weight of his hand on my waist, the taste of his skin, they were all being pulled away, drifting into the darkness like smoke. Almost there, the headmaster murmured, his face inches from mine. Just a few more threads, and you'll be a clean slate. You'll be the perfect vessel again. No more rebellion, no more love, just the vacuum. I tried to hold on to the image of Kade's eyes, those mercury silver depths that always seemed to see right through my defenses. I focused on the feeling of his heartbeat against mine, but the needle was relentless. It was a thief, stealing the only things I had left that were real. 3. The wrath of the Heir. A vibration started in the floorboards. It was low at first, a rhythmic thrumming that made the dust on the obsidian slab dance in tiny, frantic circles. Then it grew. It became a roar that vibrated in my very bones, a sound that felt like the earth itself was screaming in protest. Boom! The sanctum shuddered. A fine rain of dust fell from the vaulted ceiling, coating the headmaster's white robes in gray grit. Boom! A crack appeared in the heavy iron doors, a jagged lightning bolt line of silver light bleeding through the darkness. The air in the room suddenly tasted of ozone and ancient, unbridled fury. "He's here," I gasped, blood trickling down my arm where the needle had struck, my voice a broken rasp. The headmaster froze, his eyes darting to the doors, his composure finally cracking. Impossible. The wards are absolute. They are anchored to the foundations of the mountain itself. No one can find this chamber without the master key. The doors didn't just open, they disintegrated. A shockwave of pure silver energy blasted into the room, a physical wall of force that threw the headmaster against the far wall like a rag doll. The blue torches blew out instantly, replaced by a blinding, terrifying radiance that smelled of lightning and ancient fire. Kade Valen stood in the doorway. He didn't look like a student. He didn't even look like the boy I had danced with at the gala. His clothes were torn to shreds, his skin streaked with soot and the blood of the guards he must have carved through to get here. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. They were no longer mercury, they were twin stars of white-hot fire, bleeding silver light down his cheeks like tears of liquid mercury. Get away from her. His voice wasn't a sound, it was a physical weight that cracked the stone floor between him and the headmaster. The air around him distorted, the heat of his magic so intense that the moisture in the air began to hiss and steam. The The headmaster scrambled to his feet, his hands glowing with a sickly, jaundiced yellow light. Valen, you are trespassing on sacred ground. You are violating the laws of your own house. Think of your legacy. Think of your father. Kade didn't let him finish. He moved with a speed that defied the human eye. One moment he was at the door. The next, his hand was wrapped around the headmaster's throat, lifting the older man off the ground as if he weighed nothing more than a handful of dry leaves. You touched her, Kade growled, the sound vibrating in the very marrow of my bones. You put your hands on what is mine. You tried to erase me from her mind. Silver flames erupted from Kade's skin, licking at the headmaster's white robes. The smell of burning silk and ozone filled the air, thick and suffocating. Kade, I cried out, my voice weak, my body trembling as the Mage-Bane iron continued to drain my life force. The shackles. I can't. I'm fading, Kade. Please. Kade dropped the headmaster like a piece of trash and spun toward me. The terrifying, godlike fury in his eyes vanished in a heartbeat, replaced by a raw, agonizing terror that made him look human again. Elara, he breathed, his hand shaking as he reached for the Mage-Bane iron. The moment his fingers touched the anti-magic metal, he hissed in pain, his skin blistering instantly. But he didn't let go. He gripped the iron with both hands, his muscles straining, his silver magic clashing with the black iron in a shower of sparks that lit up the room like a dying star. Kade, stop! It's killing you! The iron? It's designed to destroy your magic. Let it try, he roared, his voice cracking with the effort. I will tear this mountain down stone by stone before I let them keep you in these chains. With a sound like a dying bell, a deep, resonant thrum that shook the entire sanctum, the iron shattered into 1,000 harmless shards. 4. The power exchange. The deep intimacy. I fell forward, my body limp, my magic drained to the point of near death. Kade caught me, pulling me against his chest, his heart hammering a frantic, broken rhythm against mine. He smelled of smoke, blood, and the cold winter air of the mountains. I've got you, he whispered, his voice wrecked, his breath hot and desperate against my ear. I've got you, Elara. Look at me. Stay with me. Don't you dare close your eyes. I looked up, my vision blurring, the world spinning in slow, nauseating circles. The sanctum was falling apart around us. Cracks were snaking up the walls, and the ceiling was groaning under the weight of the mountain. The headmaster had vanished into the shadows, but I could hear the heavy, rhythmic boots of the council's enforcers echoing in the hall outside. He took it all, Kade, I sobbed, my fingers clutching at his torn tunic, my knuckles white. The mark. It's empty. I can't feel the thread anymore. I can't feel you. Kade's jaw set in a hard, desperate line. He looked at the doorway, then back at me. He knew we couldn't fight our way out, not with me like this, a hollow shell of a girl. Then we fill it back up, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. He sat back against the obsidian altar, pulling me into his lap, my legs straddling his waist. He took my wounded arm, the one where the needle had struck, and pressed the graying mark directly against the pulse point of his neck, where his blood was thundering like a war drum. Take it, he commanded, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. Kade, no, you're already exhausted. You've used too much. If I take your magic now, you'll... I don't care, he growled, his hand sliding into my hair, his fingers tangling in the strands as he forced my head down until our foreheads touched. I would rather be a ghost, Elara. I would rather be a shadow wandering these halls for eternity than live in a world where you don't feel me under your skin. Take it. Pull it from my blood. Pull it from my soul. Everything I am. Everything I was ever meant to be. It's yours. It has always been yours. I closed my eyes and reached. At first there was only the cold, biting void, then a spark. A rush of silver fire poured into me, hotter, deeper, and more intense than anything we had shared during the Blood Oath. It wasn't just magic. It was him. It was the raw, unfiltered essence of Kade Valen. I felt his childhood, the long, lonely nights spent in the shadow of a father who saw him only as a weapon. I felt the crushing weight of the Valen legacy, the expectations that had nearly broken him. I felt the moment he first saw me in the library, the way the world had suddenly shifted on its axis, and he realized he was no longer alone in the dark. I felt his possessiveness, his hunger, and a love so dark and deep it felt like drowning in a sea of liquid stars. More, he gasped, his head falling back against the stone altar, his eyes fluttering shut as his strength began to fail. I drank from him, my body acting as a parched earth, soaking up a summer storm. My skin began to glow, the violet lines of the mark turning into brilliant, incandescent silver that lit up the entire chamber. The wounds on my wrists healed in seconds, the skin knitting back together as if they had never existed. My strength returned, 10 times more powerful than before, fueled by the raw desperation of his sacrifice. Kade's body went limp in my arms, his breath coming in shallow, ragged hitches. He was giving me everything, his life force, his heritage, his very essence. He was emptying himself so that I could be whole. Kade, that's enough, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, trying to pull away. You're going to die if I take any more. No, he murmured, his voice a mere ghost of a sound, a breath against my lips. Finish it. Be my weapon, Elara. Break this place. Burn it all to the ground. Fave. The breaking of Arkenfall. I stood up. The air in the sanctum began to swirl, a localized hurricane of silver and violet light that picked up the dust and debris, spinning it into a lethal vortex. I felt like a sun contained in a human body. The power was so immense, so absolute, it felt like it would tear my skin apart if I didn't let it out. The enforcers burst into the room, dozens of them, their black shields raised, their spears glowing with the sickly yellow light of suppression magic. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel like the scholarship student who had arrived at Arkenfall with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. I felt inevitable. I raised my hand, and the air itself seemed to bow to my will. You wanted a tether, I said, my voice echoing with a power that wasn't entirely my own. It was the voice of the Valen line, ancient, cold, and utterly sovereign. You wanted a way to control the air of Arkenfall. You wanted a cage for his fire. I closed my fist, and the silver light intensified until the enforcers had to shield their eyes. But you forgot one thing. You forgot that a weapon doesn't belong to the one who forged it. It belongs to the one who wields it. I threw my hand outward, releasing the pressure. A wave of pure, unadulterated magical force erupted from me. It wasn't a spell. It was a rejection of the council, of the marks, of the centuries of blood and secrets that had built the walls of Arkenfall. The shockwave hit the enforcers first, shattering their shields like glass and throwing them back into the hall like autumn leaves in a gale. But it didn't stop there. The wave traveled through the stone, climbing the walls, racing up the spires of the academy. Outside, the great bell of Arkenfall, the bell that had signaled the start of every class, every gala, every execution, cracked down the middle. Its final note was a discordant metallic scream that could be heard for miles across the valley. The stained glass windows of the great hall exploded outward in a rain of colored shards that looked like falling jewels. The wards, the invisible, suffocating chains that held every scholarship student in check, snapped all at once. Across the campus, hundreds of students fell to their knees as the weight of the council's control vanished. They looked at their wrists in stunned silence, watching as the marks faded from violet to a pale, harmless gray. Arkenfall was breaking, and I was the hammer. 6. The Shadow of the Father. The dust began to settle, coating everything in a layer of fine, white powder. I stood in the center of the ruined sanctum, my chest heaving, my skin still humming with the fading echoes of Kade's silver fire. Kade lay at the base of the altar, unconscious but breathing, his face pale and peaceful in the aftermath of the storm. I walked toward him, my knees shaking, the adrenaline beginning to ebb away. I needed to get him out of here. I needed to find a place where we could hide until he woke up, a place where the council couldn't find us. But the shadows in the corner of the room didn't dissipate with the light. They grew thicker, colder. They seemed to drink the remaining light from the air. A man stepped out of the darkness. He looked like Kade, but older, his features sharpened by decades of cruelty and power. His hair was a shock of white silver, his eyes 2 pits of cold, calculating mercury that held no warmth, no mercy. He wore a crown of black iron, and the air around him felt like the inside of a tomb. "Impressive," the man said, his voice like the sliding of a grave marker over stone. I stepped in front of Kade, my hands glowing with the last of the silver fire. "Who are you? Stay back!" The man smiled, a cold, mirthless thing that didn't reach his eyes. "I am the reason the Valen name is feared, child. I am the one who built the council. I am the one who designed that mark on your arm when your mother was still a girl in the village." He looked at Kade's limp form with a mixture of pity and disgust. "My son was always a disappointment. Too much heart. Too much sentiment. He thought he was saving you. He thought he was being a hero in a storybook." The man walked closer, the ground freezing beneath his boots, a trail of frost following him across the stone. "But he didn't save you, Elara. He just prepared you. He filled you with enough Valen magic to make you a vessel worthy of me. He did the hard work of tempering the blade. Now I simply have to take it." He raised his hand, and a black sigil appeared in the air, a mirror image of the mark on my wrist, but twisted, dark. It pulsed with a gravity that seemed to pull at my very soul. "The council was just a filter," he whispered, his voice echoing in the silence. "A way to find the one girl who could survive the transition, and now, the transition begins." 7. The Dark Transition. The black sigil flew toward me. I tried to block it, to throw up a shield of silver light. But my magic, Kade's magic, didn't fight it. It welcomed it. It recognized the source. The silver light in my veins turned black as ink, a cold poison spreading through my system. I fell to my knees, a scream tearing from my throat as the darkness began to consume the mark. It felt like ice being poured into my blood, freezing me from the inside out. Kade's eyes snapped open. "Elara!" he choked out, his voice a raw, broken sound. He tried to reach for me, his fingers clawing at the stone. But his father, the Patriarch of the Valen house, simply waved a hand, and Kade was pinned to the wall by invisible spikes of shadow that pierced his shadow, holding him fast. "Watch, my son," the Patriarch said, his voice echoing in the crumbling sanctum. "Watch as your little scholarship student becomes the queen of the new reign. Watch as she becomes the weapon you were too weak to be. This is the legacy of our house. This is the price of the throne." The darkness climbed up my arm, reaching for my heart, turning my vision into a tunnel of black glass. And as the world faded to black, the last thing I saw was Kade's face, twisted in a mask of pure, helpless agony, his hand still reaching for me across the void.